Hallo miteinander, I'm Geshady6, and this is Touhou Koukishin. Last time, we cultivated our rivalry with a magical doll maker and were left with a choice of two locations. In the end, we will have to visit both of them, but we are starting with the Fairy Forest, as it's shorter and easier to handle than the return to Genbu Ravine. Since Touhou Koukishin is an action RPG, everything we gain from this stage will strengthen us for anything more difficult that's to come, so it makes sense to do it in this order, wouldn't you say? Alright, so after what I said about the Forest of Magic last time, you would probably expect me to criticize the Fairy Forest for being a seemingly boring forest level. Does it even qualify as a forest? Kind of looks more like a prairie or a dusty grassland to me. I will not though, because under the right conditions, this stage will mean a lot to you. For me, I was completely swept away when I understood what Ankake Spa actually did here. You have to understand that this very fairy forest was already stage 1 of Yo-Yo Kengeki Muso. And yes, I know, with how often I've brought up that 3D Yomo game during this LP, you could play a drinking game and likely end up in the hospital. I swear it was never so important to mention as it is now. Cause you see, this is almost a perfect copy of that first stage, barring some very minor differences. Now, some of you might claim that that is an idea reeking of laziness. You could say that, but I couldn't disagree more strongly, and I do so for a very simple reason. When I started up Kengeki Muso for the first time, it immediately struck me. The graphics were unexpectedly gorgeous, the music was rockin', and the game played very well too. I do find that Touhou Koukishin has more responsive controls, but that doesn't really matter here. In short, Yo-Yo Kengeki Muso made an extremely good first impression on me, and a lot of that is related to its fairy forest. While the stages that follow did not disappoint, it is that stage and everything about it that became so iconic to me. If there's one stage that deserves the honor of being brought back nearly unchanged, it's the Fairy Forest. I also feel like it was a great idea to put this stage into the mid-game of Koukishin. I can't exactly explain why, it just feels perfect like that. So, since this stage is a stage 1 in spirit, you might presume it to be extremely easy to navigate. Not quite. You're surprisingly often given the choice between multiple paths, and you don't even have a minimap to help you. I'd say that finding all the treasures here is more demanding than the teleporter maze last time, for sure. Here's a good example. At the current crossroads, going north is the way to proceed, but unless you headed south first, you would miss a pretty big and important area. As with the complicated archives, I've tried to memorize all the important stops for you. Going back to something I said before, I have praised the music of the Fairy Forest from Kengeki Muso as rockin'. Back then it had a very energetic and catchy tune. It is very different from the track we are listening to right now, which is just very gentle and mystical. Here's a fun fact for you. As much as those two songs are such polar opposites in their character, their chorus portions are practically the same in composition. When I noticed that, it really took me back. It was such a nostalgic overload and I loved it. As for the question which of those two tracks is better, you can't easily decide that. It is a close race and really depends on your taste. But what is so noticeable here is also kind of true on average. Both Kengeki Muso and Touhou Koukishin aim for completely different moods with their soundtracks. Kengeki's is often very wild, fitting for an action game, whereas Koukishin's is more atmospheric, akin to an RPG. And on that note, I've got some more trivia to share with you. Both games were made by Ankake Spa, alright, but the music was outsourced. And not simply that, it was outsourced to a different circle for each game. Sound Zephyr made the music for Kengeki Muso, and for Koukishin, Hachimitsu Lemon was responsible. And that perfectly explains the huge difference of the two. Here's a nice little spot to survey the area. We need to get on that side of the river. In Kengeki Muso, Yomo would encounter Chirno at this clearing, and you'd fight her as a mid-boss. Once defeated, she would make an ice bridge to flee over the river, and you'd pursue her over that. Problem solved. However, Chirno is not around right now, so we need to go another way. It is actually quite simple. You simply go north on the last crossroads, just like I already mentioned. Taking the detour to Chirno's old arena kind of made losing our 220 hit combo a given. It's too bad. It also meant some backtracking for us, but that's in the past now. We are already finding enemies again. So, what was it in Kengeki Muso that barred you from going this way and just bypassing Chirno? Nothing huge and spectacular, just an inconveniently placed wooden palisade. It would have blocked our way even before we reached this chamber from this side, and you also can't break it. So, I guess a wooden palisade is one of those next to none things that Yomu's mystical Rokanken blade cannot cut, huh? Well, this looks like a sticky situation. Fighting a super fairy when she has the high ground is no easy task. Still, you're likely to be excited every single time you see one of them, because they have a chance to drop this. The Kikuichi Monji, easily the most valuable item you can get in this stage. It is a weapon that is strong in pretty much all categories. It even increases your hit points by a flat 150. You will feel the difference of this thing at once, and now that it's ours, we don't even need to use the Cinquedia anymore. We are all set for now. Phew, coming back down to earth again, I want to talk some more about the music. Yes, again. I do really like what whichever fairy forest sounds like, but there was always something that was bugging me about them. I could never really determine if they were arrangements of themes from the official Touhou games. Come to think of it, there's actually many musical pieces in Ankake Spa games that I really can't pinpoint to anything, but I think I might have an explanation. There is a possibility that they reference tracks from the Ys games, and that might seem very random to you. Why Ys? Well, you know how Touhou fan games almost always spoof a certain other game or a series of games? It is not so obvious here, but for Kengeki Muso and of course Touhou Koukishin, it is Falcom's long-running action RPG series Ys. Ankake Spa literally said that's what they had in mind when they made their games. So this is about the point where the Let's Player of World is supposed to talk about Ys as a series. Their experiences with the games, how they are different to Touhou Koukishin, which ones they liked and didn't like, those things. I've got to be completely honest with you here. I know sinfully little about Ys. I mean, I've at least seen some of them. A newer installment, Ys Oath and Felghana, looks a lot like Touhou Koukishin, so I can at least say that the link between the two is kind of justified. Apart from that, I can give you very little more. I know the series started out on more obscure consoles, for example the MSX1 or 2, but I was a Nintendo kid through and through. And the few games that were on Nintendo consoles, I'm not even sure if they got European releases. In the end, the name of Ys never really made it into my childhood. Now that I'm an adult, I have a much broader scope of what's available to me, and Ys is in fact on my long list of things to look into. It is unfortunately a very long list. There is one more thing that I do know about Ys. It is almost a trope. For every game, there is pretty much a new love interest for the protagonist Adol. And at the end, he basically gets the girl or finds himself in a position where he could theoretically be with them. Nope, always dumps them for adventuring. Are they smelly? Does their breath taste of decay? Seriously, I just think the guy has the worst commitment phobia. As if adventuring even pays the bills. But enough about that. For this upcoming instance of platforming, we want to pick Silver Rain. Knife Dispenser did us a good service so far, but against these platform-hogging mushrooms and flowers, we need something with a little more bite. Whatever you do not rely on melee attacks here. I mean, in theory, that can work, but the chance of slipping off the tree stumps is just far too high. Ultimately, any ranged attack can work here. Since we are talking about skills already, the setup we are using right now may seem a little bit strange. What can I say, I was feeling very experimental. The combination in question is Time Paradox paired with Silver Rain, a mixture we've only used for bosses so far. Restricting it to that though is pigeonhole thinking as it turns out. It works fairly well for stages too. Silver Rain is just awesome as always, as we can see right here, but Time Paradox too, and I even called that an outright boss killer in an earlier episode. It is surprisingly easy to land, as it has a much wider hitbox than expected. We got some really good use out of it right there, and that wasn't even the first time, no. It also keeps you much more mobile than I thought it would, and that really shows that you need to know all the abilities that you have, or you might be missing out in the end. Before anything else pops up, I've been praising Silver Rain a lot in the past, without ever touching upon another weakness that it has. It has fairly good range alright, but if you ever use it on point blank, it'll go over most enemies. You will miss spectacularly and probably get hurt if you don't know about that. It is not a huge problem all in all though. There is a skill later in the game that is a quasi-upgrade of Silver Rain without that disadvantage, but that won't be relevant for a good while. Well, aren't we lucky? By the way, I've looked it up for you what a Kikuichimonji even is. It basically describes a collection of historical katanas made in the 13th century by a few select master blacksmiths. Pretty much, it's just a really damn high quality sword. And the game was certainly accurate about that, I'd say. That aside, what are we actually here for? Well, we have a fairly recent excerpt of the Bunbun Maru newspaper saying that oversized footprints have been found at the fairy forest. And that right there was a perfect example of how Silver Rain won't hit things right in front of your nose. Now, the fairy forest actually has its very own boogeyman already. A giant sentient toad is supposed to live here, and that is by no means a hoax. You fought him as the stage 1 boss in Kengeki Musou, and he was actually quite a pain, overwhelmingly so. Yeah, boss difficulty in Kengeki Musou fluctuates quite heavily. Touhou Koukishin is a lot more sensible in that regard. Anyway, it is unlikely that that toad is what we are looking for, as the footprints are said to have been humanoid. So, unless that toad went to Renosuke to buy an oversized Super Mario Bros. 3 hopping boot, he's not going to be our crook. And knowing bad business sense Renosuke, he would probably keep all of those to himself anyway. Still, we can expect trouble, from that toad or something else. Here were some red and turquoise mushrooms. What's the difference? I don't think there is one, and if there is, it's minor. Seriously, is it Christmas in Gensokyo? That chest usually only holds a sterling silver dagger, but we got a golden knife from it. Golden knives are pretty much direct upgrades to Cinque Dias, not the best for combat, but always with truckloads of item drop rate on them. Now here we've got quite a challenge at hand. Navigating over these lily pads can be very dangerous, as the spitting flowers will knock you to your doom if you get too close. That is why we are taking it very slowly and killing those weeds from afar. There is no shame in being a cheeky coward here, as I've been killed numerous times by them before. Do not take any risks. That's a lot of wolves over here, a whole pack it must be. Come to think of it, we've been seeing those since episode 1, but I never really got around to talking about them. That is because there really isn't much to say of them. They're not difficult at all. They can use a tackle, and they can also hurt you by howling. Yes, howling. It hurts in Sakuya's ears, maybe? They very rarely do the latter, though. What is truly most annoying about them is their backflip. They'll sometimes do one of those when you try to attack them in a too obvious manner, and while they backflip, they are completely invincible. Nothing will even hit them. It can be a nuisance, and that sums up the wolves pretty well. A nuisance, but not really difficult, as already said. So, things are looking good. We are almost at the end of the stage now. You might have noticed that we've been saving our spell card for a while. That is because a boss awaits, and it's always a good idea to head into a boss fight fully charged. So, is it going to be the giant toad after all? This was where you found him last time. Well, no. Recycling a stage for reasons of style is alright, but we at least deserve to see a new face. And it's the face of Sunny Milk. Not to be confused with milk that's been left in the sun for too long. That's just gross, come on. She is the last of the 3 mischievous fairies for us to meet, and as for her role in the trio, she is the leading personality. A fairy of action and quick, although sometimes very poor decisions. One such poor decision was declaring a rivalry to us in revenge for her 2 buddies. I hate to break it to her, but that rivalry is very one-sided. If Sakuya did in fact publicly acknowledge Sunny as her rival, she would become the laughingstock of all Gensokyo, especially after all the tough folk that we've already defeated. Still, we should cut Sunny some slack. Compared to her 2 friends, Luna and Star, she is the most capable. Again, this doesn't mean a whole lot, you know, but she spawns more and meaner bullets than those 2. Noticeably so. The bigger bullets Sunny uses do hurt quite a bit more, and she has a move where she expels a lot of them very suddenly, and twice in a row too. It's probably her best trick. This is about the point where we kind of lost our stride a little bit. Sorry, I guess I got a bit out of balance. It is only a small triumph for Sunny, especially because we just sealed the deal. And that did it. From the following exchange, we learned pretty much nothing new. Yeah, story-wise, this stage was filler if I ever saw one, but you know what? I wouldn't want to miss it for the world. I'm Gash86, this was Touhou Koukishin, and next time, going down to the river and beyond. Bis bald!